Hi, welcome to our next episode. And today I have a special guest, and her name is Fletcher Johnson. So, welcome to the channel, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so excited to meet you and to talk more about what you do and who you are. So, would you like to introduce yourself, Fletcher? And also, why do you do what you do?
Ooh. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Megan. It is a pleasure and an honor. So, why do I do what I do? I had what I like to call a quarter life crisis after I got out of college, and my major was social science, but I knew I didn't want to be a social worker. And at the time, after graduation, I was still waiting tables, which I was very good at and loved, but it was not fulfilling my soul. And I just kept thinking to myself, so many people, when they grow up, they don't like their jobs and they're miserable. And I don't want to be like that. I felt like I wanted to make a difference in the world, but I was still discovering my gifts because I was very young. So I really had to do a lot of soul searching. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I like yoga and I like people. So maybe I'll become a yoga teacher. And so I did way back in 2005. I went and took my very first yoga teacher training, and honestly, it has shaped the rest of my life and brought me right up to where I am.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And you also do Ayurveda. Is that right? How does
Yes.
is that part of your offers that you have, or is this what's the journey been with that one?
So Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. They were born in the same country. They have relatives in the same house, and Ayurveda is considered the science of life. So it is a science, and just like yoga is a science, and they have a lot of crossover, but they're different. So originally, when I was having my little quarter life crisis, this was in the early days of internet and social media. It wasn't dial up, but I was taking online quizzes and doing some research and trying to just discover who I was, those quizzes actually told me that I should be like a bus driver or something. So I'm glad that I didn't trust too much. But in the process, I discovered this Ayurveda quiz, and it really helped me to understand myself through a different lens. But at that time, in my world, nobody was familiar with it, even though it's an ancient science. And so essentially, I was talked out of and talked myself out of going down that path. So I went down the yoga and Reiki path. But then during COVID, I had an opportunity to work with Joyful Belly Ayurveda and took their digestive health course. So it's been lurking in the background for a while. And I would do research and always be looking things up. But it wasn't until COVID that I did my formal training.
Yeah, okay. And what kind of person would would feel drawn to Ayurveda? Like how does it help people?
I would say it's a seasonal harmonizer. So Ayurveda is a beautiful classification system. It's excellent with looking at patterns. And what's beautiful is each of us have patterns, but it also works with the patterns in the earth cycles and different elements and times of year. So, for example, in the spring in the northern hemisphere in the United States where I am, it's getting warm and it's also damp. So summer is fire, it's associated with the heat, and then fall is wind. And then the winter is earth, and that moves a bit more into the spring as well. So then at different times of life, you have certain seasons. As people are aging, they're a bit more windy, they become thin, frail, not always, but overall. And then in middle life is the fire years of transformation, go, 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 get it done, work, work, work. And then the younger years, you think about baby being born, has a lot of earthy features, little chubby cheeks. And so you could say that somebody has a season of life, but there's also seasons within the year. So each person, much like in astrology, has a blueprint where they're born and a natural category that they lean towards. But the elements in your environment would also play a role in that. So somebody that lives in the desert would have a very different lifestyle than, say, somebody in the Arctic. They would eat differently. Their daily living schedule would be a bit different. And so when a person has imbalances, you want to do the opposite thing. And so being able to identify these different elements, then you could say, okay, well, when I'm at a restaurant, I'm going to make this choice instead of this choice because now I better understand how it's serving me versus just a diet where I'm not supposed to eat this certain thing.
Okay, yeah. So
Like
is it,
a cucumber is cooling and a chili is hot.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I understand that now. So it's a lot of it, is it diet only, or is it I mean food and
Definitely
drink
lifestyle too.
lifestyle?
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Um and I want to ask you a bit about synchronicities. So what does that mean to you? Because we talked actually off camera. We talked about we're both like light. You consider yourself a light lead, a light worker, and I consider myself a light leader. So how what does that mean to you? Like a light worker and synchronicities, your experience with that?
Sure. I've never been much for labels, but light worker is the one that I accept wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And to me, that comes down through my Reiki lineage, even though I believe that all the different things I'm involved in are essentially working towards the light. Yoga certainly is. I think that all principles are just using different vehicles to get there.
Yeah.
So synchronicities, I think, could be most people probably think they're coincidences, and perhaps sometimes they are, but sometimes there are coincidences that you just can't ignore, or the timing is just too impeccable. And I'm sure that you have had a time where maybe you and your bestie were talking, oh, have you talked to so and so lately? And then all of a sudden, like, the phone rings, or you see them. Or maybe you see a person that you haven't seen in a long time, but then you see them multiple times and you have this breakthrough conversation. And then it's almost like picking up breadcrumbs on a little trail of, oh yeah, that was for me.
Yeah. I for me, I've recently seen a lot of like the 1111 number.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I know for me, I what that means to me is that I'm on the right path. Like because it's like the lines for me. It means like I'm moving towards what I need, where I need to be, and it's
Mm.
like a encouragement to keep going. And this is where I'm meant to be. Yeah,
Yes, I love numbers. Even like a 444, I
yeah.
included in my business stuff.
Oh yeah,
Same
yeah.
thing. And it was funny because I was waking up at 4:44 in the morning for days
Oh
on end. And finally I thought to myself, all right, I'm just going to go in the other room so I don't wake anybody up and I'm going to do a little meditation. And actually this was pretty intense. So I go in and for the first time, Archangel Michael came to me and his presence was overwhelming and but it was very clear. He made it very clear that it was him and he told me, don't be afraid. He said, don't be
mm,
afraid to live. Don't be afraid to die. Don't be afraid to have kids. And he went down this whole list. But the number one thing was don't be afraid to live. Because at that time, I was holding myself back emotionally. I had been going through a lot of changes. And it was a very pivotal moment for me. And that's when I knew I was ready to elevate.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was actually going to ask you about that next, about like a huge, were there any moments in your life work that were completely transformed you? So, I wanted to ask, so I mean, I don't know if everyone listening would understand who Archangel Michael is, and maybe I can ask you how, like, so you must have heard of him before. You actually had that moment with him, and did you consciously like call for him, or what was the experience?
It's very interesting. I've worked with a lot of different deities, but
Mm.
in my entire career, archangels weren't really my thing. I didn't have anything against them, but I didn't have any personal experience at all, and had not reached out really. And so this really took me by surprise. So there was things that I felt, I felt a large presence or the color blue and this number, but then afterwards, I'm looking these things up, and there's multiple different things that were associated with him. And honestly, I had no idea. But for me, that was just even more confirmation that my experience I knew was to be true, but that just validated the experience even more.
Yeah, and how has this helped you in your business? Has it influenced the way you run your business? Um, or maybe were you even did you have a business at the time when you had this experience?
I was in between. So I started River Warrior
Oh,
Yoga back in 2005, and I did that all the way up until COVID. And then I shut down then. But I don't want to say it was because of COVID. I honestly think it just shined a light on something that needed to shift anyway. So it was a challenging time for me. You know what? It felt like in the hero's journey when you go into the cave for a while and you need to be quiet before you can come back out and show your gifts to the world. It felt like one of those moments of, come on,
mm,
girl, you got this, hang in there. It really helped me get back in the swing of things after a time of being quiet for a period. Yes, and Elevate is the name of my new business. So um, I would definitely say that was a moment when I was ready to take a step forward.
yeah, I feel like it was this moment where you felt like this encouragement, and it was like alignment or something around as well. And
Yes.
yeah, and yeah, I think we can talk a little bit about your because you said you do yoga and
Mhm.
a bit more about what your new business offers.
Sure. So, River Warrior Yoga, um, I was doing more things than just yoga, and I felt like I needed an umbrella that was a bit larger. And so it was time for me to rebrand. And then the name Elevate actually came through a series of meditations. First, I saw kind of a mountain, and then a different time, I saw a new moon. Then I heard the word. Apparently, it's a popular word. So when I was trying to get my domain names and all of that, I
Um,
had to add on to it. And I thought, well, what am I elevating here? Of
mm,
all the different things that I like to do, what's the common thread? And I thought to myself, okay, health. So technically it's elevate your health, but I just like to think about lifting people to a higher place.
yeah. And you offer yoga and did you say Reiki?
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
Yes.
so what would be if someone came to you, how would you be able to help them?
So right now, doing all of my Reiki appointments and mostly everything is online.
Okay.
But we're working with energy anyway. So I always tell people it doesn't need to be in person because
Hmm.
I don't need to be touching you. So, um, what would that look like? It's a little different for everybody. So some people might come in and say, I want to learn yoga. I want to strengthen my core, or um, I need to learn how to woo-saw a little bit. So some people know right off the bat, or I'm constipated. Can they kind of put it together. But
Yeah.
other people, and I find most Reiki people, their number one symptom is, I don't know why I need to work with you. I
Mhm.
just know that I need to work with you. And so for those sessions, you can't really plan for anything, but I just try to tap in and allow spirit to communicate with me what they need the most at that time. I mean, of course, I'm using my science mind as well, but especially in the case of Reiki, I'm doing mostly intuitive work. And I
Yeah,
work with
yeah.
crystals too. So I always have on what I call this
Wow.
my spiritual safety belt. And
Wow.
anytime I do energy work, I always keep this puppy in my
Oh,
lap.
yeah. Um, yeah, so that's really cool that you've combined both Reiki and yoga. So would you do a live online yoga class? Is that something that you do or yeah?
Yes, so I will do online classes. I could do one-on-ones or groups. I've been doing just some freebie things lately so that people could get a taste of my style and see what types of things I'm offering. And then I have a foundational course for people that are ready to take a little bit of a deeper dive.
Yeah. And do you also offer Ayurveda advice and would you do a full consultation for that too?
I do. I don't have that up on my website, but if somebody
Oh,
was to just book a private Reiki session, but they wanted Ayurveda, that would be totally fine.
yeah, okay.
So,
Um, and so yeah, so you said energy, because you're working with energy, you don't have to see them, you don't have to touch them. So do you have
mhm.
plans to, where do you plan to expand your business, or do you have any particular things where you want to, things that you want to do, yeah, maybe in the next year?
Well, I had a brick and mortar crystal shop in the town where I live
Oh, yeah.
for the last year or so, but in the last few months, I've just decided to take everything online and then
Mm.
do pop-up events here or there or workshops. So
Oh,
I can come see you if you
yeah.
want.
Okay.
I'm
So yeah, you do
always one to
have,
come to
yeah.
Australia, but
Oh,
mostly
yeah.
I'm doing everything online at
Yeah.
currently.
Okay. So you don't have the crystal shop right now?
It's online too.
Yeah. Okay. So you had
Mhm.
you had a physical store, but now it's all online. Yeah.
Yes. My
Yeah.
favorite thing actually to do is to choose a crystal to work with during the Reiki session and then get it all charged up and then ship it to them afterwards in like a
Uh,
little
yeah.
cute box and
Yeah.
confetti. And
Oh, yeah.
and they can pick it out themselves, but I
Mm.
always think it's really fun if they let me pick it out.
Yeah. Okay, and yeah, I had a phase where I was obsessed with crystals. So I've still got them and
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not so obsessed with them anymore. I've tried all these different things and now I've moved on to what feels much more like my thing. Yeah.
Mm. And what is that?
Yeah, it's well, I've been able to use this to heal myself. So I did training in timeline therapy, hypnotherapy, and NLP. So doing that training was actually I was allowing the trainer to do the work on me, and when I was working through that, it went straight into the root cause of the things that were holding me back. So I holding on to those emotions from the past, like negative emotions that like you can well after yeah, and also limiting beliefs.
Hmm.
So things like a common one is people don't feel confident about themselves. Another one is people don't feel that they're good enough. Um,
Hmm.
they they're not worthy. So that's something that I really worked on with myself and also helped with my tomato allergy. So I used to be allergic to tomatoes, and
Hmm.
through the work that I did, I cleared it. And I think yesterday or last
Wow.
night I ate some like fried tomatoes, and today my skin is good. Like because I normally would get like rashes on my face, and if I continue eating it, it would just keep spreading on my body and my neck. Yeah, remember it was
That's
pretty bad.
amazing.
So it's a
I'm
lot
not
of
familiar with timeline therapy, actually.
yeah, yeah. It's now I know what it means in on a different level because I mean when you learn something for the first time you don't really have a full understanding. You just kind of absorbing everything.
Hmm.
So what it is, it's like it's an advanced form of NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. So what the timeline therapy, like the process is going back on the client's timeline. So the person would go into their unconscious. So all of this work is on the unconscious. So we
Hmm.
would go into a point in their life. So whatever they say, I'm not here to say, oh, this happened when you were 5 because I can see, I can, it's not like that, not like a psychic.
Hmm.
So I would ask the client, okay, so let's work on. So if today we're working on fear, so that's the first thing that we'll normally work on is to release fear on that in that person's body in their timeline. So they would go back to a moment where they felt fear. And then some people who say, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know where it is." So I would ask them to tap into their body, go into their unconscious and trust themselves. And then they'll say, "Okay, I can feel it. I think I was around 3 years old when this thing happened where I felt fear." So I would go in, I would ask them to go back into that memory and we would feel into that where it is in our in their body and then
Hmm.
and then and go that the main thing is actually going in and seeing what the positive learning in is that in positive learning is in that moment because a lot of the time when we're experiencing things as a child from 0 to 7 we don't have the resources, we didn't have what we needed at that time, so that's why a lot of people we just keep it in ourselves, in our body, we repress it, and then it shows up in our current life. So what that process does is to when we release that fear, when maybe the person is like, oh, they have to decide, they have to connect in their own brain what is the positive learning. I can't say, oh, it's because of this and that. They have to
Hmm.
like feel into what these people like in this experience, what was the positive learning. It could maybe they'll say, oh, I actually know that now I'm strong, and maybe before they were they someone said that they were weak or they didn't feel powerful, and then the learning is, yes, I know now I'm strong and powerful, I can do anything. And also giving that resource so your adult self can go back and give that resource to your younger self. So in
Hmm.
that whole process, and also anchoring safety, so a lot of it is people didn't feel safe at the time.
Hmm.
So we really anchor that in and then checking to make sure that the emotion has gone in that moment. And once it's gone, we go back to, and come back to now and then yeah, we normally around that time it's like a lot of release, emotional release occurs.
Hmm.
So we work through fear, work through sadness and anger, and then um, guilt, shame. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's
Have
really
you?
deep stuff.
Yes, yes, yes. Are you familiar with the book The Body Keeps the Score?
I've heard of it. I've heard of it. Yeah. Yeah.
It aligns really beautifully with the principles that you're working with. And it essentially talks about how, well, specific to traumas, but essentially that your body is holding
Mm,
memories and patterns and energies
yeah.
from these pivotal experiences. And in the yoga community, you might say, oh, your shoulders are always tight, right? And
Mm,
then you release your shoulders and the tension is gone. But it's more than that. We know that it's more than that. It goes deeper and it's held much. I actually just had a story pop in,
mm.
if that would be
Yeah.
all right to
Yeah.
share. So I was familiar with concepts of things being stored,
Yeah.
And my whole life since a youth, I had a lipoma on my hip. So for decades, it was fine, everything was fine. And then it started getting larger and it started hurting. And I had a surgery scheduled to just pop it out, even though it was fine. So I go to my acupuncturist and I tell her what's going on, and she does a treatment. And she didn't tell me what type of treatment she was doing. I thought it was just the usual. And all of a suddenly, I can hear that things are getting faster and that the frequencies are picking up and she's moving in a pattern and I can hear and feel all this, but I just keep my eyes closed. And all of a suddenly, my hip where this lipoma was jumped off the table, what felt like a foot just up and off. And it was what was being held released.
Mm.
And immediately after that moment, it never hurt again. It never had a pulse. And I probably didn't even need the surgery because, and she told me later that she used the Fibonacci sequence, which is like in the fractals and stuff, and essentially created a high enough vibration pinpointed on this area that it was able to move that energy up and out and released it. It was amazing.
Oh my God, super powerful. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
I
mean,
I
like,
couldn't
so,
not believe it after that.
but you said she was an acupuncturist, right? You said acupuncture. So
Yeah.
then I didn't expect
Oh,
Fibonacci
she would
sequence.
use sound healing as well. So she
Oh,
put in the
okay.
needles and
Yeah,
then she had tuning forks. And with the
yeah.
tuning forks, she was
Uh,
playing all around my
mm,
body.
yeah. Okay, yeah. I totally believe that. Like the frequency and the vibration, that's awesome as well. That and you didn't feel pain, right? You just it felt
Mhm.
that movement going up. Yeah.
Yeah, it took me by surprise, but
Mm,
I could very specifically feel it leaving my body.
mm.
I mean,
And
there might have been some sensation with it, but not as intensely as I had felt it before.
okay, so you said so this you said was it called a
A lipoma is
lipoma?
essentially,
Yeah.
yeah, it feels like a cyst, but it's fat. But it's
So
like a hard mass that kind of
okay.
you can
Yeah.
palpate it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I guess
okay.
it's like a cyst.
Okay. And and then after that, did you get a second checkup, like a follow-up to see if it was still there?
I did go through with the surgery anyway, but in hindsight, I probably didn't need to
Mm.
because
Yeah,
it felt
yeah.
amazing, and there was probably a month in between the dates.
Mm.
But I thought just to be on the safe side, better just to get it out so that it didn't turn into something else.
Okay.
But that experience was so powerful that there is not a
Yeah.
doubt in my mind that if I had canceled the surgery, it would be fine.
Yeah, yeah. It would have probably just, dissolved or dissipated by itself. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, let's do maybe I do a last question. So, um, what inspired you, or what inspires you now, in your business, and what inspires you as a person to really that draws you towards where you want to be?
Mm. You know, I I love to witness other people's transformation, and I would not say that I'm responsible for it, but just it's an honor to be with somebody on a journey that is so beautiful, that you were able to be a part of. And then when they have such major shifts, say like I was describing with the acupuncturist, if I was her, that would have been a really fabulous day for me
Oh
in the
my God,
office.
yes, yes.
So it um, facilitating people's experiences brings me a great deep satisfaction. And it sounds sort of commonplace to say, but I do want the world to be a better place. So I feel like I want to give people tools to help themselves, really.
Yeah, actually, now I do have a question, another question that I want to ask. Okay, yeah. So I wanted to ask about what is your view of the universe? Like, what do you believe? Because you said that you want
Ooh,
to help, you really want to help others, and yeah, what is the bigger, like the biggest picture of your relationship with the universe?
wow. That's a good question.
Yeah. That just came up because you said something and then
What do I believe about the universe? Well, I believe that there are patterns and signs and synchronicities, and I believe that there's things that are within us and also around us on this planet and around us in the universe. And I sort of see it like a spiral, like a circle, but evolving. And I know that there are other forces out there. Some I've had a personal connection with, and others I'm still learning about. Um, and I think that all different energy practices have their place, and a lot of different practices are hoping to take us in this direction. And so, of course, I would never want to cause any harm. Um, but in my deepest heart of hearts, I think that I'd like to say everybody, but I think that we all just want there to be love and light and good things and positivity and not, you know, there's different levels of suffering, but on a human experience, we all share it on some level. And I think that humanity is beautiful and painful, and that there are lessons to be learned and silver linings to every dark cloud. And sometimes when we're going through challenging experiences, that there are things that we need to learn from it. So even like a synchronicity, maybe that synchronicity is that you dated the same boyfriend 5 times, it wasn't the same guy, but it was the same pattern. And eventually our eyes become open to, oh, I need to make a change within myself in order for that pattern to shift. And that might be just on a small scale, but I think there's things could happen on a global or universal scale similarly.
yeah, so yeah, it was a big question. Yeah, so thank you for that. And yeah, so where's the best place where people can find you? So you're in the States, and
Yes.
where's the best place if people want to make inquiries or they want to find out more?
Sure. The place with the most information is probably my website, which is elevate444.com. But I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. I'm just revamping my YouTube. It was a bit more active some years ago, but I'm starting to become more active on here now. So people can reach out anywhere. They can just shoot me a message and enjoy some free content.
Okay, thank you so much, Fletcher, for coming. I'm so grateful for your time.
Thank you. I very much appreciate this.